you're on a plant-based diet, where do you get your protein? Well, there's 9 amino acids called essential amino acids. Virtually every plant has all 9 of those amino acids. So essentially, every plant provides you sufficient amount of amino acids. Now, here's the caveat. Where vegans or plant-based or vegetarians go wrong is they don't consume sufficient amount of amino acids or protein that gets converted into amino acids. You don't actually need the protein, you need the amino acids that construct the protein. So there's 2 components. Number 1, how much protein you are consuming. And number 2, what is the state of your digestive capabilities to extract the amino acids out of the protein? And virtually maybe 1 in 10,000 diet gurus understand that.
We believe that you are strong by design, and you were made in God's image to have a strong body, mind, and spirit. You're listening to the #1 strength and health authority podcast in the world. So let's get ready to unlock your potential and transform your life in today's episode.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode here on the Strong by Design podcast. Thank you for joining us today. If you're a new listener, this is a great one for you. I have 2 special guests today, and I have a lot of loaded questions here. I think there's going to be a super helpful conversation for people struggling to get results, the results that they're after, and certainly even people who know a lot about nutrition and know about dieting and all of these things still can struggle in their own ways. So this is something that's going to reach everybody, no matter where you're at, no matter what your level or your background level is. I think this will be super helpful and beneficial. We certainly would love to thank all of our past listeners of the show. If you're continuing to find the Strong by Design podcast enjoyable and downloading our episodes, we thank you so much. If you haven't yet left a 5-star rating or a review, we appreciate that very much. That really helps the show to grow and to show up in other people's feeds as a popular show. And we would love if you would hit that 5 stars or leave a review. Love to read those and get that feedback from real people listening. And we just have so much fun here at Critical Bench with the Strong by Design podcast, helping people in so many different ways in body, mind, and spirit. So we thank you so very much from me and the other hosts, Jared, Tanya, and certainly the founder of Critical Bench, Mike Westerdahl. So getting to our conversation today, we have 2 special guests, as I said. 2 amazing men. I'm going to do them justice by at least giving you some insight as to who they are and why we're speaking with them today, because this is, as I said, an area of health and wellness that is largely misunderstood, often confused, and people really find themselves just super frustrated. And I've been one of those people many times in my life, even with all the knowledge and things that I've gone through over the last 3 decades. So Matt Galant, guest #1, he's a kinesiologist with a degree in the science of physical activity. He's also the CEO and co-founder of BiOptimizers. He's been a strength and conditioning coach for multiple pro athletes, a self-defense instructor, and has over 18 years experience formulating supplements for the company BiOptimizers. We've been affiliated with for years and years, and I've been taking their supplements for many years. He's been successful with mostly with a ketogenic diet for over 30 years. He's also a serial entrepreneur. That's not something he should be arrested for. A serial entrepreneur is somebody that has a lot of great ideas and actually takes action on them. And he's built over 14 profitable companies. And his cohort, the other co-founder of BiOptimizers, is Wade Lightheart, who we've had as a past guest on the podcast a few times. He's a certified sports nutritionist, advisor, and president director of education and co-founder of BiOptimizers, as I said. He's a plant-based and drug-free athlete for more than 2 decades, and Wade is a 3-time national natural bodybuilding champion, competed in both the IFBB Mr. Universe and the INBA Natural Olympia at the age of 31. At the age of 50, can't believe that he's that old now. Gosh, Wade, stop aging. He came out of retirement to win the Open Men's and Grand Masters categories at the INBA Ironman International, and then competed at the PNBA Natural Olympia. 6 months later, he successfully ran his first marathon in 4 hours, which is highly commendable. I've done a half marathon in about that amount of time. So well done, Mr. Lightheart. Matt and Wade, so thankful and grateful for you to be on the podcast today to tackle this big topic.
Great to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's really, really, really great. It's been a long time coming. I know you guys are super busy, and we got this date set many, many weeks ago. So I've just been counting down the days here. And so here we go. So right out of the gate, I'm going to hit you guys with, some questions that I know a lot of our listeners have on a regular basis. People that I just have everyday conversations with have these questions. And so I kind of hand-pick these ones because I feel like these will, we can go off on tangents, but these are the ones that most people have and will resonate with them. So we're in the early part of the year, a new year, 2024, and people have already started new eating strategies and already started throwing in the towel just weeks into these new adventures of eating and frustration. What is the best piece of advice each of you in like a 60-second version could offer somebody like that who has already kind of hit the wall and is already looking to just stop any kind of momentum and get back to just enjoying their foods? Start with either one of you, 60-second or less.
Yeah, I'll start with, there's something we talk about in the book. It's actually kind of the last thing we talk about, which is that unbreakable commitment to your health. And once you make that, and that's way beyond a resolution, it's way beyond a goal, it's really committing to yourself that health is one of the most important core values in your life. And once you make that, of course, Wade and I will go through our challenges at times and gain a few pounds over the holidays, but we always get back on the path because of that commitment we've made to ourselves. Because as we get older and older, that commitment to your health becomes more and more critical, and our goal is to live long and strong. So, to me, that's like the foundational thing, and then just hundreds of tactics you can apply on top of that. Wade?
Yeah, that's a great foundation, or because everything else in your life improves when you focus on your own health. You're better for everybody else, and you're more clear, you have more energy, you have more patience, all of these things when your health is a primary focus. That's awesome. Wade, what would you say, sir, if any different?
Well, I think the keys to success are acquiring professional help, because if you're not there, it's obviously there's a high likelihood you have the wrong strategy. Number 2, personal accountability, and that's usually correlated with professional health, because professionals will help you maintain accountability to them and to a program that is going to get results. A lot of people drop off because the strategy they employ isn't or does not appear to be working early on, and they get to the hopeless stage, and then the rationalizations come in. And the final piece is, which Matt sort of touched on, which is a strong emotional reason why. All the logic in the world will not get you the results. Results come from a combination of a logical strategy based on science combined with an emotional reason to overcome the biological biases to overeat and to move less. Those are genetically built into every single person. Those biases and are proliferated in a technologically advanced world. In other words, we've made things so efficient, which is a natural tendency of biology to improve the efficiencies. But we've extended that into the world so that we now have to schedule exercise, which was primarily for our ancestors just living. We had to struggle to get food as opposed to order DoorDash. And those two components make a strategic strategy, like a strategy to get to where you want to go, imperative, and someone to hold you accountable, because you're biologically going to defer to the easiest mode, and you need to overcome that. And that comes from an emotional reason why. Was it your kids? It's your family? Is it an insult? What is it that's going to drive the emotionality enough so that you have the humility to get the help you need?
Now, I received several weeks ago a really amazing looking package, a giant box. And I'd never opened a box like this before in my life, where I opened it and inside I found a really cool looking hardcover book with some silverware. Like that. So anybody watching, obviously on YouTube or any of our other social platforms, can see this this really cool box. What prompted you at this stage? Obviously, you've been in this industry helping people, thousands of people in the supplement nutrition space. What got you to the point where you said, "Hey, let's just go all in and create an encyclopedia here of nutrition that is like our just kind of puts all of our knowledge, all of our wisdom, all of our experience in one place," right? I mean, what brought you to that point? Or was it something that's been kind of looming for years?
Yeah, looming's one way to put it. Wade and I argued for many, many years about which diet was the best. I was a ketogenic zealot. Wade was a plant-based zealot, and we just argued. And over time, we realized that we had some common ground, like universal nutritional principles that everybody could apply, regardless of what diet philosophy you were following. So the more we argued, the more we found common ground. And eventually we decided, you know what, we need to write this book, because the reality is with social media, I think there's more nutritional misinformation that's being pushed out there than ever before. Kale's evil, oats are evil, seed oils are evil,
vegans are evil, whatever.
On and on and on, right? And they're using that to grab attention and to do all these things. And as a marketer, I get it. And because things have become so complicated, we needed to write a 540-page book to basically displace the myths that have been created and try to bring clarity and science back to nutrition. Wade?
Yeah, I think to summarize it, I just did a post on this today, which there are psychological and social biases built into the fabric of how we determine what's right. And I would also include scientific bias. For example, as a vegan plant-based athlete, people will say, well, that's not possible. And I remember 22 years ago when they said that wasn't possible. Or they'll say, well, you don't see that many vegan professional athletes. Okay, well, what's the sample set of vegans versus non-vegans? How long has the science been developed around meat eating, which has not been as well developed over veganism or vegetarianism? And so what happens, and then the commonalities, which are assumptions built into the scientific research or the social culture that you live in, then become propagated as facts. And it's really hard to overcome that unless you're willing to go out and experiment with it. And so one of the things that we also found in common is that Matt was able to do things on a ketogenic diet that a lot of people said weren't possible on a ketogenic diet. I was able to do things on a plant-based diet that a lot of people said weren't possible. And what we recognized is most of the things that people advocate that aren't possible are just simply not common. And most diet gurus are simply exposing their own ignorance as opposed to advocating the level of understanding and comprehension and excellence. And so that's one of the things that we take in the book. It's not just, hey, how many calories and what protein and stuff like that. It's to understand how we come to erroneous conclusions and then how we can overcome those biases in a way that becomes universally applicable regardless of the dietary choice that you want.
Yeah, that's really good. Wow. Yeah, just my mind's spinning a little bit because I have I have a lot of just natural questions that come up along with the ones I've already prepared, but we'll get there. So the big question is, what's wrong with the diet industry today? And obviously is it really all about people just marketing for the marketing to fit what they want to sell, right? I mean, what we all have seen is that the marketers will say just about anything to get you to pull the trigger on their widget, their item. And that's working, obviously. It's worked for a long, long time. And people, I think, have just been so mesmerized by it and confused at the same time. And they just move from one thing to the next. They have a closet or a garage full of all these things that they've just been, collecting, if you will, that are supposedly solutions to their problems or to their pain points. But is this all the fault of all these different companies? I mean, what are we to believe about like a healthy diet? Obviously, I mean, it's kind of a big question, but and however you want to tackle this, we can kind of go at it any way you want. But maybe what are some of the misunderstandings or some of the outrageous things that you've seen that you just can quickly point to and say, well, this is wrong because of this? Or,
well, first of all, I've been a marketer since I'm 19 years old, so been at it for a long time. And yes, marketers will try to create a new concept or a twist in a concept, promote it as the ultimate solution, and then try to build a tribe out of it, because literally they can make millions or tens of millions or even hundreds of millions of dollars if it's a grand slam. And as human beings, we all want to be part of a tribe. We're hardwired for it. And that's one of the things we talk about in the book is, you don't want to build your tribalism or seek tribalism from a dietary philosophy. There's better things you can connect on, like spiritual connections and other things that I think are more profound and more solid than, hey, you're following the same diet philosophy as I am. So that's a big challenge and a big issue. And the reality is, if you break it all down into the most core basic things, you've got a ketogenic diet, which means you're forcing your body to use ketones for fuel, or you're eating carbs. I mean, that's one of the most basic divisions in nutrition. And of course, people will create a new twist in a ketogenic diet. Now, some people will prefer eating plant-based diets like Wade. And when you just break it down into macronutrients, calories, micronutrients, it really demystifies a lot of the nonsense. And what happens, a lot of people will take something like kale and say, well, if you eat too much of it, you're going to have an oxalate overload and you're going to get kidney stones and blah, blah, blah. And it's one of these little facts that might be true for a very small percentage of people that might have a genetic mutation that causes them to have problems if they overeat it. And they blow it up on social media as if everybody should be panicking and everybody should avoid kale like it's the plague. So we could spend like hours decoding all of the dirty marketing tricks that a lot of nutritional gurus will use to grab attention and, in my opinion, to confuse people and give them a disservice. So, Wade?
Yeah, another example of that would be, and I get a question of this all the time, is like, well, you're on a plant-based diet, where do you get your protein? We can't get all of the amino acids. You don't get complete proteins on a plant-based diet. Well, there's 9 amino acids that your body are called essential amino acids. And virtually every plant has all 9 of those amino acids. So essentially, every plant provides you sufficient amount of amino acids. Now, here's the caveat. Where vegans or plant-based or vegetarians go wrong is they don't consume sufficient amount of amino acids inside protein that gets converted into amino acids. You don't actually need the protein, you need the amino acids that construct the protein. So there's 2 components. Number 1, how much protein you are consuming. And number 2, what is the state of your digestive capabilities to extract the amino acids out of the protein? And virtually maybe 1 and 10,000 diet gurus understand that. But what we do know is people tend to have more and more digestive issues as they get older. And the more restrictive a diet becomes, and let's use bodybuilders as maybe one of the most restrictive diets out there, the more complications tend to evolve from that diet. Virtually every pro bodybuilder I talk to has to deal with some sort of dietary or digestive component because of the sheer mass of protein they eat in order to sustain that. The other thing is we're not calibrating for genetics. We're not calibrating for drug use. Okay? So now we have the capability to look at your genetics, the optimal and suboptimal components, and develop a diet around that. The other thing is where a lot of people will say, well, we don't see so-and-so doing this or that person doing that. And they're not factoring the drug factor. Drugs accelerate results, whether that is a diet drug, like Ozempic and those guys that are, going crazy right now, which are producing tremendous results in weight loss. Now, there's complications with that if you're just using the drug. Can you safely use it? Probably. Could there be some complications? And could those complications be more pronounced in some segments of the population? Absolutely. So what happens with a diet expert that gets on there and said, I tried ABC diet, I tried this drug, it almost killed me, and you better stay away from it too. Discounting the 98% of people that would have no issue with that problem, or the 50% or whatever. So there's a legitimate belief inside of that person because something didn't work for them. Therefore, they start to compile a bunch of facts that support why it didn't work for them. And you're, as the listener, is supposed to assume that that's the same for you. And the reality is it isn't. And Matt and I probably have crafted the only book I've ever seen in existence, and this is why we created it, is it addresses all of the major dietary strategies and explains the advantages and disadvantages of each one and how to overcome the disadvantages of any diet. So we could just get past this story. Are you keto, paleo, what the hevero? Who cares? Is your diet producing the result you want? Is it keeping you healthy? And can you sustain it over a long period of time? That's all that matters.
Sustainability, I think, is really what is what should be the goal for anybody making a change. Is like, can I eat this way for the rest of my years? And if I can't, then it's temporary. And I'm just that meaning, whether it's temporary after 30, 60, 90 days or a year, I will just fall back to my old ways, and whatever weight that I have gotten rid of will just probably come back if it's not a sustainable type of diet. For me, I know one thing. I know for me, it's not so much what I eat, but quantity, how much I eat in the land of abundance here, But just getting to elimination diets themselves, because that's where I think so many people go wrong. They seem to, it's eat this and don't eat that for this period of time. And you can get, obviously, some results from that. If you just stop eating bread, that's an elimination diet, right? It's like a bread elimination diet. No more bread for the next 6 months. You'll probably, if you're a heavy bread eater and you want to lose some weight and you're relatively active, you'll probably lose some weight just because you were eating too much darn bread. But that doesn't mean that that's a good diet for a good strategy for everybody, because some people like a little bit of bread, but they don't overdo it. And, and so what's your take on that when it comes to making food evil, or that there's evil types of food, evil carbs, evil fats? Let's start with Matt.
Yeah. So everybody is, we're all hardwired based on thermodynamics. Calories in, calories out is real. And if we look at the most successful diet of all time in terms of producing ripped, shredded, muscular people, aka bodybuilders, and of course Wade's been at the pinnacle of that world, if it fits your macros has been the number one way they've done it. And technically, you could make, if it fits your macros diet, work with white bread and get shredded. And it could work. I'm not advocating for that. It'd be harder because you still need to get your protein and et cetera, et cetera. But I think in the world of nutrition, you have like two main camps. You've got, if it fits your macros camp, which are going to produce incredible results. And then you've got the evil food camp, which wants to try to demonize whatever the latest food is. And, the dose creates the poison, right? The dose creates the effect. And again, we're not advocating for people to just consume too much sugar, too much whatever chemical that is out there in the food. However, when people are so stressed out about eating this and eating that, I think they start literally having anxiety around dieting, anxiety around food, and it creates a very unhealthy relationship with nutrition, right? We just came off the holidays. Was eating a piece of bread that your mom made evil because it has gluten? I mean, we could go on in that rabbit hole. And I think it's much healthier psychologically and emotionally to just look at food and say, yeah, the amount matters. Again, if you're going to overeat anything, you're going to gain body fat. So, try to eat at maintenance or below. And back to sustainability. For some people, if it fits your macros, is the right psychological and emotional approach because they love food. So if they can get away with eating a piece of pizza once in a while, or eating a grilled cheese for breakfast once in a while, or eating macaroni and cheese for lunch or whatever they're into, and they can make that work, that's a great thing. That's a beautiful thing. So anyways, go ahead, Wade.
Well, the reason most people get worried about a diet is largely in part because they've eaten in excess of calories over what they're burning. And so the immediate remedy to that is to go on some form of diet that reduces the consumption of that excess calories and puts to less calories, and hopefully enough less that it's below their metabolism and they get to the desired weight. The problem with that is that most people are approaching diets from a restrictive component, and that is, I need to eat less. And the real success in dieting comes from mastering your metabolism. In other words, to be able to burn more calories than you consume on a week-to-week basis, and strategically using calorie surpluses to keep your metabolism high, and strategically using exercise that allows you to keep your metabolism high. So those two things. Now, this is where drug manipulation comes in as a adjunct to that. It's creating an interface that skews results overall. I talked about that at the very first. And I'm not saying drugs are good or drugs are bad, but if you are talking diet and you're not talking about metabolism, or you're not talking about drug usage, then you are not presenting an honest presentation of what's influencing the success of the people on that particular diet. The third piece is, what are the genetics? We know bodybuilders who take prodigious amounts of drugs, and you can look at their blood profiles, their liver enzymes, and they're relatively healthy. I also know of people who have taken one cycle of drugs and screwed themselves up significantly. So what's the variable there? The individual genetics. And so I really believe that in today's world, we have a huge advantage that very few people are taking advantage of, and that is get a genetic test. See what predispositions that you might have that would allow you to select a diet that you're going to be more successful of, and then get a hold of the book and understand the magic of metabolism over the long term. Ultimately, the healthier you get shouldn't be a restriction of the choices. It should be an expansion of choices, because it's your body's capability to roll and adapt to whatever environment you have it. And that includes the food that you consume.
Yeah. I mean, I can speak from experience just from a few years ago working with a nutrition coach over like a 6-month period. Just it was kind of Mike and I here trying to, have more accountability in our lives. And just the mere tracking of the foods I was eating, and get it, it's calories in, it was calories in for me. Like the calories out, the exercise activity burning part, that was the same. That was kind of unchanged, and that's been my lifestyle for many, many years. But it was the food consumption. Once I was capping myself and really monitoring what I was eating, tracking how much, trying to really focus on my protein intake and really sitting at the same amount of calories per day, that's when I saw the most results I've ever seen and lost 20 some odd pounds really safely and slowly over that 5-6 month period. And it felt great. And as soon as I stopped tracking that closely, of course, those pounds come back on slowly over like another 3 to 6 month period after that. So it was almost like a little bit of a test. At the same time, it's hard to stick with that for because you got to weigh things and measure things out, and and it's extra time. But I do encourage anyone listening, if you want to just make one change, don't stop eating the things you're eating. Just track what you're eating and cut yourself off. I mean, working with a nutrition coach would be great, just to have an idea of what your calorie intake should look like. But the mere tracking or logging what you're eating and seeing it, like registering it somewhere, it can really be a game changer for people. Do you guys have any feedback on that or any experience?
Well, there's a couple things I'd like to talk about that I think a lot of people don't mention. And that is, we talk about this book, I think people underestimate 40% of the calories they consume. So if they think they're eating 2,000 calories, they're probably eating 2,800. Okay?
No, you're 100% right. That was me.
And then there's an interesting thing that I discovered inadvertently last year that really illustrates the problem with the calories in, calorie out model relative to exercise. So it took me 18 months to get prepared for the Mr. Olympia of a very restrictive diet and primarily weight training activity. Upon getting done that contest, I decided I would compete in a marathon. So I actually increased the amount of time I was exercising by doing extended long cardio sessions, which I had no experience of. Here's the ironic part. In the time that I went from that 18 months to 6 months later running a marathon, I actually gained about 12 pounds. Now you think, well, Wade, you're exercising more. Your calorie meter says that you're burning more running all these miles. Why is it that you ended up gaining weight? Because one of the metabolic effects that I hadn't managed for as someone who had never done endurance training was the excess in hunger I would feel after long runs or the day after a long runs. My body was adapting and I didn't learn the nuances, and I just watched the weight keep going on. And I'm like, wow, this is really interesting. You'd think it'd be the opposite. You'd think that, runner skinny, runner, lighter, all that sort of stuff. You're in that mind. And it was completely the opposite. So now I'm going back at it this year to see if I can figure that out. I've talked to some experts in that area that do a lot of cardiovascular training, and I'm going to make some components and some adjustments and see what happens. We'll find out in about the next 6 months of where that goes. So I like to run the experiments myself, but you have to be careful about the calories in and calories out, because often what times is people will eat an excess amount of calories or do an excess amount of exercise and throw their metabolism into a stress response where you go unconscious, you stop eating, you get injuries, you're not able to control your diet. All those things can happen. We address a lot of those things in the book about satiety inside your diet. Satiety is the key goal that you want to be objectively getting for in any diet strategy.
Yeah, agreed. Matt, any Any feedback in that department?
Yeah, just to add to what Wade said, I mean, one of my favorite chapters in the book is called the Optimized Metabolism. And what we're presenting as a new way to look at calories in, calories out is what can we do to increase calories out without just relying on training more? And Wade just illustrated that he did more cardiovascular exercise and did a little bit less weight training. One of the things we talk about is anabolism, which of course anybody who's lifting weights is very familiar with, is one of the most powerful ways to increase your metabolic output. You have to burn calories, of course, to recover, but even synthesizing a single pound of muscle tissue, some estimates that I've seen is it takes 5,000 calories to build a pound of muscle. That's a lot. So there's bodybuilders, and that goes back to what Wade was saying too with the drugs. I know bodybuilders that have done some really hardcore muscle building cycles, and they had to eat twice as much not to lose body fat. They could not keep up. They were up to 6, 7, 8,000 calories a day, and they were still losing body fat on a DEXA scan. So that's how powerful anabolism can be. And that's why for anybody who wants to lose weight and look better, I think the foundational exercise has to be resistance training. 3-4 days a week, good full body workouts, training hard, and then you add maybe a couple of hours of zone 2 cardio on top of that, and you got everything you need to be strong, build muscle mass, and keep your heart and brain healthy. So that's really important. I think a lot of people go to the gym, and Wade and I have seen all these people many, many times as we were trainers for a long time, come in and do hours of cardio a week. And there's a metabolic adaptation, which is the opposite of what we want when people do too much cardio, right? The body becomes really efficient at that repeated motion. And in the first week, maybe they're burning, let's say 500 calories for an hour of running. Fast forward 12 weeks later, same amount of cardiovascular activity, they might be burning half that amount. So that's something people don't talk about that much. And it's a lot more challenging to adapt to weight training compared to cardio.
No doubt. And there's no doubt too about, that your appetite will change based on your output and the type of output that you have. And that can be really tough to manage. It really can, especially I like to eat. I mean, again, that's always been my biggest drawback, if you will. It's not the foods I'm eating, it's just the amounts of them. And my wife would look at me sometimes with a bowl of food or a plate of food and say, you can't eat like you're 22, when I was 22, I could kind of get away with it. You kind of eat as much as you want because you're so active. I'm not that. I sit at a desk on a computer most of my hours. And then I go out and push weights for an hour, and I think that that's going to be the magic bullet. No way. What do you got?
Well, I share the same challenge myself. And what I learned from my genetics is that I have a suboptimal genetics on food satiety. In other words, it takes longer for my body to feel full than it does an ordinary person. And so to combat that, I've created high fiber-based foods, because fibers, like I have a salad that would, shock most people. In fact, whenever I go to Whole Foods and get a salad, I inadvertently have someone comment going, "Wow, that's an amazing salad," or "Holy," and they're surprised at the size I eat it. But that high fiber amount in that salad is very little calories inside of the whole thing. And I can eat this giant bowl and I feel full. And that feeling full keeps me from slipping into carbohydrates because my body runs really well on carbs. And the challenge with carbs, many people in the ketogenic diet would probably say this, is that they're susceptible to overeating carbs, and they just went to a ketogenic diet so they don't have to deal with it. For me, I don't do really well metabolizing fats, and the idea of giving up my carbs just feels horrible to me. I just don't want to do it. I love my carbs. I like the euphoria I feel from carbs. So I use a combination of fiber and protein and strategic carb cycling. And what I mean by that is every week I get an unrestricted carb day where I just eat as many carbs as possible. And if you use the dietary strategy inside our book, that can enhance your metabolism and give you all the feeling that I can eat the forbidden foods. And if you can eat the forbidden foods that are actually contributing to your success, then you realize that there are no forbidden foods. There's just an incorrect strategy and getting them. So I get that overeating day. I just do it once a week.
But 3 tactical things everybody can do in terms of food quantity or hunger management. One of them is to drink decaf coffee. So they've done the research on, even coffee, black coffee will help lower hunger, but decaf is actually even better than caffeinated coffee. And you can drink, of course, a lot more of it and not get overly caffeinated. That's 1. 2, smaller plates. So smaller plates will actually psychologically make you eat less. Buffets, if you go to the buffets, they'll have the smaller plates for a reason. They've researched that. It's one thing. And then the third thing is eating a smaller variety of food. And this is a really big one. The more variety of foods you eat, the more cravings you'll have. And Wade, maybe talk about the simplest secret, because if anybody's ever pushed this to the absolute pinnacle that I know, it's Wade Lightheart.
Yeah, I was just getting to that too, because you have the simplest dieting secret that's in the book. So what is it? How can people use it?
Eat the same foods every day. And basically, you can expand that a little bit to about 12 successful meals that you cycle in and out. Now, the average person eats about 25 different food meals. Usually it's burgers and fries, pizza and beer, chips and salsa. You're talking about the American diet, right?
Taco night. Yeah.
Right. Omelets and toast, and the reality is that diet is calorie excessive. So when you go to why are dietary restrictions good in the short term, is because they force compliance to eating a select amount of foods, because there's only a certain amount of foods that are going to meet your requirements. And there's another piece that happens, and that is decision-making fatigue and the availability of a wide variety of tasty foods. So you got to design a diet that's going to work for you, and that's usually required of a scientific professional, or you can read the book and go through that and figure it out for yourself. Number 2, you want to have those meals that work for you already prepped. So in a moment of pressed time or a moment of weakness, you're not subject to the grocery store aisle because you're going to lose.
Sure.
It's too good out there. You're going to lose. And then number 3 is you don't spend so much time thinking and planning and selecting the food that it's just like, okay, meal 1, meal 2, meal 3, meal 4. That's it. That's all I do. I've been doing that successfully for years. The more foods that I expose myself, the more I want those foods. And so I've noticed that, in particular, because like I said, I have that suboptimal satiety gene. I can destroy my diet in about 30 minutes. It won't take me long. You give me a bag of chips, I become a social idiot. It doesn't matter how big the bag is. If you give me the family size bag, I'll just eat the whole bag, not even think of it, especially if there's a sporting event on. I tell my friends this, like you have to get the bag, or I have to create a bowl for everybody else, because I'll just eat them all, not even thinking, and all of a sudden I'm 2,000 calories over my diet 30 minutes later, and like, what happened? And then there's a worse thing that happens on top of that. You start going down the downward spiral of the F-its. We talk about that in the book.
F-it.
And that is, I blew my diet. Now I'm going to go Chris Farley in, university, and I'm just going to start gunning down everything and celebrating my inability to manage myself as a sign of my masculine, I don't give an F attitude. And I love that attitude. I've lived that attitude. But you have to realize it's a coping strategy for subconscious guilt. And at the bottom behind all of the failures that people experience in their diets is guilt. I'm not good enough. I can't follow this. It doesn't work for me. I'm not, whatever. There's a subconscious story. And so one of the things that we touch upon is about identifying these feelings and using a really cool technology, which Matt is a professional, he's a certified practitioner in, and it's called the emotional freedom technique, and about how emotions drive unconscious behavior and how to address those. Maybe, Matt, you might want to talk about this, because I think this is one of the biggest secrets that almost no one's talking about in dietary success.
Yeah, if you look at really, and I discovered this working with clients, and more so women than men, and I'm not picking on women, but what really drove a lot of the overeating or giving up on their diet was emotional issues. And if we get into emotional issues, what does that mean? Typically, it's trauma that's being triggered. And now there's some great tools we can all use to process the anxiety or to process those uncomfortable sensations. And one of the ones that I've used the most is called EFT, as Wade alluded to, emotional freedom technique, also known as tapping. So you just tap these meridians, and it shifts your nervous system from sympathetic to parasympathetic. And there's been some well-done research by Dawson Church on the effects on food cravings. And what I love about it, it's free. Anybody can use it anywhere, and it works fast. Typically 2 to 5 minutes, whatever was causing that emotional discomfort is gone. I still use it usually probably once a week, twice a week myself, if I feel any sort of emotional disturbance. And it's one of these things you can use to really clean house. There's a great book called The Body Keeps the Score. Strongly recommend everybody reads that book. And it's basically a book about all the traumas we have, which is defined as painful events that were not processed properly, get stored in the nervous system, and then our amygdala, which is constantly looking for threats, when it sees something that's similar, it will react. So a lot of people are spending a lot of time and energy in these reactive modes, which cause them to feel anxiety, feel angry, feel stressed out, feel all of these things. So if you can process these things out of your nervous system, your cravings, your reactivity will be cut down 80, 90, 99%. And Wade and I have spent weeks of our lives with electrodes in our head doing neurofeedback, which is another way you can do it. There's a lot of tools you can use to process these traumas. But whatever modality you pick, strongly recommend you really dedicate yourself and try to clean out completely so that your emotionally driven food cravings are gone, because that is definitely one of the biggest destroyers of diets.
Oh, without question. Everybody handles those a little bit differently. I know for me, I can walk past a platter of donuts here at the office all day long, or cakes and ice, cookies or whatever, if we're celebrating someone's birthday, and sugar always has a way of being the celebration food. But if any of that food finds its way into my home and it's 9 or 10 o'clock at night and I'm watching football or something and everyone's asleep, it's very difficult for me to avoid those types of food items. But I have no problem with it when I'm preoccupied here at work, walking past that all day. I don't even crave it. I don't have any desire for it, but it'll hit me hard if I'm home. So I think knowing that environment where those foods can be and can't be, or where you need to minimize them, I think is a huge help for people, especially with children. A lot of us have kids, and what the kids are eating maybe isn't really appropriate for us, or if we can actually curb what they're eating so that it's not available to us at all in the home, that would be great. Just thinking about the moms and the dads out there that struggle with those same things. Those cravings seem to hit, I know, for a lot of people kind of late in the day, especially people who are busy and it's all about convenience eating, right? So they'll skip breakfast, they'll eat on the run, they'll maybe have a big dinner, and then all of a sudden 9, 10 o'clock at night, they're still up, and they're trying to fill that gap. When they finally have some downtime and some me time, they're like, ooh, here's an opportunity for me to pile drive another 1,000 calories. Do you have any tips or tricks that you could, that are maybe in the book, mentioned in the book, or just off the top of your head for that type of person?
So food has a drug-like response in our brain on a lot of levels. Like if you eat something that's hyper palatable, which means it's loaded with flavoring, loaded with sugar, loaded with fat, your brain has a heroin-like response. Your dopamine goes off the chart. Carbohydrates will increase serotonin. So a lot of people will crave sugary things at night because your brain tends to want to be more serotogenic and chill and calm down, which will actually help you sleep, except one of the destroyers of sleep is having undigested food in your intestinal tract. So ideally, your last meal is like minimum 3 hours, ideally 4 hours before your target bedtime. So if you're going to try to be in bed by midnight, your last snack or meal should be around 8 p.m. And ideally, you're eating enough that you're not getting hungry when you're going to bed, because you don't want to go to bed hungry, then that could be challenging. So it goes back to some of the fundamentals, making sure that your dinner has enough protein, enough fiber, enough fats. Those are the three things that will give you satiety. And if you're, somebody who tends to crave sweeter things, there's all kinds of healthier sweeteners you can use to make, healthier snacks or healthier desserts. And of course, if you just want to go buy something, like one of my go-tos is Quest chips and a Quest bar. So that's what I've been eating a lot at night. The chips give me the salty, the bars give me the sweet. They've got those really, these newer bars, not like the older ones, but almost like a candy bar. They're lower sugar, a bit lower protein, higher fats, more very ketogenic friendly. And, I eat that. I've got about 500 calories. I've got about 45, 50 grams of protein, and it solved all my cravings. So I think figuring out those type of food strategies that you can use without blowing your diet, it kind of goes back to if it fits your macros, is really important. And Wade's got his favorites as well.
Oh, I bet those favorites maybe look a little different, since we have two different ideologies when it comes to food, right? Between the two of you.
Yeah, for me, I have found that the number one factor for my food cravings, particularly at night, are two components. One, sufficient amount of protein in the diet. That's a big one. And the type of caffeine that I consumed early in the day. So this is something that I don't know how many people have identified, but it's something unique to me. And the third piece I'll talk about, and how do you remedy and discover these things for yourself. So for me, because I'm on a plant-based diet, I need to be extra conscientious about getting protein early in the day. And I found that if I have more protein in my first couple of meals, my satiety in the evening is enhanced. The second thing that I found is if I don't eat in the mornings, and let's say that I'm using something like yerba mate, which is a great caffeinated beverage, I'll consume maybe a liter of that tea in the morning. And I don't feel hungry for maybe 8, 9, 10 hours. But suddenly at that point, it's like my blood sugar falls off a cliff and I become super craving carbohydrates and will tend to eat sweet and salty or sugary foods, high caloric content that I can get into my body relatively easy. And this makes it didn't really make sense. You didn't really hear about these. But I discovered this by a simple thing that everybody can do. And it's this. It's tracking your individual patterns. So even if you don't have a genetic test, because I learned this before genetic tests were available to the public, my bodybuilding coach, Scott Abel, made all of his athletes write down their diet that they were eating, as well as the moods that they felt. Did they wake up tired? Did they wake up energized? Were you hungry in the afternoon? Did you have food cravings? And how did you sleep? And just writing those out every day for, a week, 2 weeks would be optimal because you've probably covered the bulk of all your experiences that day. All of a sudden, when you go back and review this, you start to see patterns in your behavior that reveal the unconscious habits that you've taken on relative to your work life, your family life, your exercise, whatever your lifestyle is. And you start to expose those, and then you can develop and cultivate mitigation strategies around that. And so one of the things that I stopped doing is drinking yerba mate tea early in the morning. I love yerba mate tea, but I switched to a different type of tea and I don't have that problem. Number 2 is I ensure that when I first start the day, I try to get like 100 grams of protein into me by noon. If I do that, it's easy the rest of the way. If I don't eat until noon and I don't have that protein content in my diet, the likelihood that I'll have increased food cravings at night are very high. So those are the little nuances that no expert can tell you. You have to find these out. And the exciting thing is once you get these, you start to realize is that you can change these behaviors. You can be successful. You don't have to follow all the diet gurus' advice. You can actually learn what works for you specifically and recognize that we have unconscious patterns. All of us, I do, Matt does, you do. And I think for dietary experts, it's important for us to share our suboptimal components of the things that we've struggled with, the challenges that we have. We're not some super, genetic elite athlete or someone that could just get away with everything. We've all had these struggles, and it's why we're so passionate about sharing this information in the book so that we can get past all the biases, get past all the pseudoscience, get back past all the cult dynamics that are out there, and provide people a set of tools that they can just say, oh, I'm feeling this, and they can refer into the book. I'm seeing this, and they can refer to the book. So it becomes a reference guide to illustrate the suboptimal ways and the mitigation strategies for those suboptimal components that we all struggle with.
A little bit of fun here, just because, keeping things light. If you had to pick your top 3 protein sources, I'm curious what Matt's are and what Wade's are. I'm sure there's a bit of difference here. So 3, if you could only have 3 proteins for the rest of your life, Matt, what would they be?
I'll
stick with protein because that's the basis. That's the foundation.
Last Sunday, for the first time in my life, I had A5 Wagyu from Japan that ate olives. I've had A5 Wagyu before, not the ones where they basically just feed them olives. It might have been the best piece of meat I've ever had. So if there's an unlimited budget that's going on the list.
Yeah, you're right. Unlimited budget.
Of course, wild salmon, probably Pacific wild salmon, king salmon, big salmon. Wild salmon is one of the best. It's pretty clean for seafood. And in some sort of game, I'm a big fan of elk. So probably elk, A5, olive, Japan, Wagyu, and wild salmon. Be my 3.
Love it. I'm sure Wade's are not those 3. What are yours, Wade?
No. Hemp, peas in all of its form, and beans. So people go, God, that sounds really bad. And it might be to a meat eater, and I don't make any apologies for it, and I'm not suggesting they convert to it. But if I was to look at my capability to be a successful athlete and stay in a food satiety zone, despite my lousy genetics, those 3 components have contributed to my success more than anything else. And so without them, I couldn't be successful, or it'd be very challenging to be successful for my individual genetics. I'm not saying that's for everybody else. Hey. So those are my 3.
Love it. Thank you for sharing. It's always good to get a little bit more personal. I'd be interested to see how those food items, how are you prepared with those 3 different food items, Wade? Like, what does it look like to eat those 3 things? I can imagine what Matt's talking about, but yours are a little bit different.
Well, every day I eat Protein Breakthrough, which is probably the best tasting plant-based protein on the market that we crafted at BiOptimizers. And I make it into a chocolate pudding. So most people don't know that competing to the Mr. Olympia, I ate chocolate pudding every single morning for breakfast the entire time. So it was pretty awesome.
That's cool.
Now, maybe what people might find my second big meal of the day is a big salad with a lot of chickpeas. So the chickpeas, you just put them in an Instapot. It's done in 30, 45 minutes. It's done. And I put them in a big jig and I just throw them on top of my food. And then the same thing in the evenings. I like something warm and savory, right? So I have beans and, black beans, brown beans, whatever. Those are cooked up in the pot and they're served with various spices and things. And I'll mix that with a carbohydrate like rice or potatoes and a green vegetable. And for me, that food makes me feel satiated. It makes me feel good. I like the taste. I like the flavors. And we've crafted it all of those things are in a way that feel and taste good. And many people are shocked. And I would say, if any person thinks that a plant-based diet might suck, you got to check out my chocolate pudding recipe. It's available at BiOptimizers, and you can get it and try this and eat this for breakfast. Yeah. Kids love it. Grandparents love it. People love it. You can eat chocolate every single day and get ripped to shreds. And I love that idea.
Oh, it's amazing. Sounds fabulous. And what's funny is that third thing that you said is kind of like a bean concoction with various spices and flavors and probably maybe some onion and peppers and different things that are in there mixed with a carb of some kind, some type of rice or potato. My wife was making that routinely. She used to all the time years ago. And I found those meals to be, and I'm a meat eater. I eat steak and, all the hamburger and, I eat all the fish. But I was just satiated with a big heaping bowl of some type of white rice and a bunch of beans and all the stuff added to it. So, yeah, interesting.
Yeah. Well, most people fail to recognize that if they've had a plant-based diet, a lot of time it's their unconscious bias that makes that suck. You go to a restaurant and some, wilted tomatoes with some poor brownish lettuce and a garbage dressing. Well, that's the same thing of going to a butcher and saying, I want your worst cut and I want to just cook it on the stove with nothing. And you see, this is where the cultural or experiential biases come in and build an assumption around that. And I think one of the reasons that cooking shows are so popular is to find ways to make food that you eat more fun by use of spices and flavorings. And so I think if you can find healthy versions of that, you can make any diet really robust and tasty and delightful and satisfying. And I think if you can recognize that going into what is perceived as a restrictive diet, then you'll find that the most successful people have made restrictive diets taste very flavorful and good, and their body adapts to them, just like people adapt to a very unhealthy diet that tastes really good but is really bad for your health.
Oh, that's a great point. I appreciate you sharing that because I think that is very helpful for people. It doesn't need to be bland and tasteless. It can actually be, absolutely delicious and just a little bit different. The book obviously is part of this ultimate nutrition system, but there's other things that can go along with this. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, Wade and I spent a week in the Hollywood Hills, literally filming the entire book in video format. So for people that love video content, that's available. And then when you go through the video course, you can actually ask questions for each module and our team will answer those. not only did we write a 540-page book, but when you buy the Ultimate Nutrition System, there's a 200-plus page supplement book that you get. And again, it's not a promotional piece for our products on any level. This is just talking about every type of molecule, every type of supplement, and it's all scientifically driven. Then we have another guide, which is all the scientific references for the book. You get a summary of that. Get 3 cookbooks for free. One's a plant-based, one's a carnivore cookbook, then one's a paleo cookbook. And you get From Sick to Superhuman. So you get all of that when you buy the Ultimate Nutrition System. And I think the link for it is ultimatenutritionsystem.com/strong by design. And you get a discount code as well. I think 10% off if you hit that link. Or you can just buy the book. So it's up to you.
Oh man, that's fantastic. I mean, I've had this in my possession, and I've been I gotta say, because of the thickness of it, and a hardcover book immediately gets your attention, you know. I will say it's a little intimidating, right? But knowing that you have these other things that can kind of help and walk people through it, I think is very appealing. And certainly I think people would want to take advantage of that for sure. People love video. People love seeing what the questions are that everyone has, right? And so I think that can be extraordinarily helpful and beneficial to people for them to stay on track. Certainly. That's the hardest part, is staying on track with something that's new. You make changes. And another quick question is, a lot of people think massive change. This is like, I have to flip my world upside down. I would imagine that inside this, that you guys don't necessarily preach that. And it's a little bit more of maybe baby steps or making small changes and maybe seeing those things evolve over time. And this is just me kind of speculating or just forming my own opinion or adding my own opinion to this conversation. But I do find that the small steps, at least initially, to build the momentum to help people kind of start to see these changes take root. Would you guys agree with that approach? Or
Yeah, I would. One of the things that Matt incorporated in the book is validating the wins and giving yourself an infinite dopamine loop. Okay, I followed my diet today. That's a win. I got to the gym today. That's a win. You know, I picked up the appropriate protein supplement for me at the store today. That's a win. You know, I didn't eat that extra dessert. That's a win. So what happens when most people start a diet, it's too restrictive. There's too many changes at first, and it's unsustainable. Okay. And what happens, as soon as they have anything that's off the diet, they go, oh, I knew it. I'm out. I'm a bad person. I can't follow this. And whatever that traumatic story from their past, you've hit a trigger. And you see one slip up or one mistake as the destruction of everything. And what I would say is that that's a misidentification of what the issue is. And if you're making and the other thing is you're putting a time limit on your progress. In other words, I have to lose this 10 pounds by this time. I have to look like this for my high school reunion, my wedding, whatever. And that tends to lead to extreme and unsustainable behaviors that set you up for bigger failures in the past. How many times have you seen this? And that is the one thing that I think there was a double-edged sword when Bill Phillips came out with the 12-week lifestyle transformation. The video or the picture evidence was so compelling that everybody got on it, but it's only 12 weeks. It's not about a lifestyle moving forward. Now, I know Bill advocates a lifestyle moving forward and staying with that, but people miss the thing. And then the biggest loser, maybe Matt wants to talk about like the biggest loser data, which is probably the most extreme version of that.
Yeah, one of the things we talk about in the book is preventing metabolic damage. Like when you diet really hard, really fast, your body has all of these starvation survival mechanisms that kick in. And when those kick in, you're in trouble. And both Wade and I have experienced that. I pushed too hard, too fast for my wedding and hit my weight. And then I was hungry for 2 years and regained pretty much all the weight I had lost over the previous 2 years. So you have to be very, very smart about your weight loss program. And we talk about doing diet breaks, making sure it's slow and steady. And if I was to simplify it, you want your body to feel safe. If your body doesn't feel safe, it will fight back. It fights back again, increasing hormones, increasing hunger hormones, increasing NPY in the brain, lowering leptin, lowering thyroid, lowering testosterone, losing muscle mass. I mean, all of these things are all starvation survival mechanisms that have been, hardwired and built and evolved over millions of years. So you don't want any of that to happen. And there's nothing wrong with taking your time. And that doesn't mean it needs to be super slow. And sometimes you diet maybe for 8 weeks and then you got some stuff going on and you just go to maintenance for a couple of weeks or for a month, and then you go back at it. That's a great strategy. And that's what I've done personally. So again, just take your time, whatever your goal is. And one of the things we talk about in the book is always have a goal. So even before you hit your weight loss goal, make sure you have another goal afterwards. Maybe it's building lean muscle mass. Maybe it's an athletic goal. Maybe it's longevity. Whatever that goal is, line it up so that you constantly have a dopamine loop that's propelling you forward. And one last comment on the book. It is not designed to be read cover to cover unless you're a nutrition nerd like Wade and I. It's really a choose your own adventure. Look at the table of content and jump right to the section or the chapter that appeals to you right now, that you need the most help with or you're the most interested in. That's how you should really read the book.
Yeah, that's a great message. And I want people to really, when you see a 500-page book, most people run from books. A lot of people don't like to read, but people also have bookshelves with great book collections, right? I think people like the idea of books and like the idea of literature and learning and growing from stuff. And the fact that this is the way it's put together, you could just go in and take a particular topic and read on that and focus on that and kind of get a better understanding there. And then, as you said, Matt, go back to it, and whatever phase or time you're in your life, the book will have different appeal to you, I'm sure. And you can kind of just poke through it in different ways. It's obviously it's a terrific resource, right? Probably, if not the best thing that's out there. I mean, it's called the Nutrition Bible, for goodness sakes. So it's got to be fantastic, right? Last thing I want to, just for our listeners, is that we all should, we all are going to fall a little bit short sometimes, fall off the wagon, make a mistake, have a bad day, have a bad week of eating. Maybe we're traveling. There's something going on in our personal life that's, kind of difficult. And so our eating's erratic. Give yourself a little bit of grace. No one's perfect. Everyone kind of makes those mistakes, and don't be so hard on yourself. And tomorrow's a new day. Every day's a new opportunity to kind of get back on track and do it a little bit better. So don't just throw in the towel and, give up on yourself that easily. So I want people to, we've talked about that in past episodes in different conversations for, just give yourself a little bit more grace. This has just been so much fun. How can our listeners, again, get this book, Matt and Wade, and, anything else, any other platforms that they can find your content and see what you have to say?
Yeah, the URL is ultimatenutritionsystem.com/strong by design. And for anybody who is interested in optimizing their digestion or their sleep or their health, make sure you go to BiOptimizers.com. That's BiOptimizers.com. We have a full suite of digestive products, full suite of sleep products, brain enhancement products, check it out. We think they're the best in class. That's how we build everything that we do. And of course, we have a lot of other goodies on there.
Oh, no doubt.
Yeah, and everything that we do has a 100% money back guarantee. If you don't think it's the best product that you've ever taken in that class, you just get your money back. It's really that simple.
Well, we have a cupboard filled with BiOptimizers stuff in it, masszymes and prebiotics and probiotics and you name it in between. Obviously, we've been big fans of what you guys have been doing there for a very long time and have a great relationship and want to continue that. And it's been just a real joy for me to be able to talk with you about your latest work and how helpful this can be to our listeners and will continue to be for years to come. What's great is podcasts continue to get downloads for a very long time, and this is an evergreen conversation with a book, I think, and a system that can really benefit people for life. So thank you for what you've done and for making time to be on the show today. Absolute pleasure, certainly. Listeners, be sure to check out the link that Matt gave you, and we will certainly share that in the show notes. So just go there. If you missed it or didn't write it down, just check the show notes. It's in there for you. And certainly give this episode a thumbs up. Leave us a review. We'd love to hear from you. And go check out everything that Wade and Matt are doing over there at BiOptimizers, BiOptimizers.com. Fabulous work. And we'll talk with you next time on the Strong by Design podcast. Absolute pleasure. God bless you.
Thank you so much for listening to the Strong by Design podcast. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe so that more people can find out about our show. Plus, you don't want to miss any future episodes with the amazing guests and topics we have lined up for you.